Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Deep End Podcast. I am your host, new host for tonight, Adam Krautwurst. And with me, we got a couple of big-time winners, six-figure winners, Judd, Rosengart, and Phil Orban last year. Yes, sir, with the FFPC Playoff Challenge winners here. And we're going to dig into some lineup stuff. They're going to puff their chest out about a big win last year where they smoked me. We'll talk a little bit about that, and we'll get into this year's competition. I'm super excited to talk with the pros here about how they built their roster. So this is the Deep End. Well, man, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight, and congrats on your big win about a year ago.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Always come on. Happy to come on and talk about it. Can I just clarify what's going on in my house here?
Yes, please.
I don't have power. We're in the North Carolina area, so this isn't like my setup normally. So I just want to clarify for everybody.
Listen, and I'm happy you brought it up because I am in the Northeast as well, and we have a wind warning here, and at any moment I could lose power, which we talked about before the show, which is perfect. Because I was watching your episode from last season with Balky after you guys won, and you guys were by yourselves without Balky. So that might happen again tonight. We'll see. Hopefully not. Hopefully not. But listen, your share of 150K should have got you a generator down there or something with all that weather you're getting.
You would think so. Well, it was 500K. It was our
500K. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. So we should have been able to afford a generator, but it went other places. It went other places.
Of course. I get it. So awesome, guys. Yeah, thanks again so much for coming on. This is going to be good. This is a competition I think everybody loves. You know, it's a unique thing that we get to do for like a week out of the season, right? Like you get this little like 4 or 5 days to build these rosters to kind of take down these big prizes here. And the FFPCs are already unique as it is with the tight end premium. So I think it'll be really good to kind of break this down for people who aren't aware. It is a $500,000 prize for the $200 entry point. There's also a $35 entry point with I think that's the $100,000 prize there. Yep. And the rosters are 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, 1 tight end, 4 flex, 1 kicker, 1 defense. The flex can be a running back, wide receiver, or tight end, and obviously the tight end premium fits in there too. So yeah, we'll just dive right into kind of some of the stuff. Talk to me about last year's roster, guys. Talk to me about like how you were able to build. Like, what was your actual physical process of building and constructing your rosters?
Yeah, so this is our 5th year, I think.
4th year. This will be our 4th year.
Right, this will be our 4th year, and I'm going to oversimplify it. We get together on a Zoom call. We spend way more time than you think you would putting this together. We do 5 teams. We split it with 4 partners total. So when we look at this, we pretty much build on a spreadsheet, right? Like I'm going to oversimplify what this is, but there's a combination that we try to hit of how many running backs, how many wide receivers. You don't want to be, because of the 4 flexes, you don't want to be too heavy with one or the other. And then the other piece is, who do you fade, right? Because you have to fade 2 teams per roster. And that's arguably the hardest part. Last year, I think there was an easier piece to it because Tua was hurt for the Dolphins. So you could pretty much axe all the skill positions out of Miami. And that kind of simplified things as you looked at the rosters as a whole.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the spreadsheet point is a really great point. Now, do you guys share, do you play any other fantasy football together? Like, I know there's 4 of you guys in this crew. Do you guys co-manage any high stakes teams? Do you play any like home leagues and stuff?
Yeah. So go ahead, Forbes.
Yeah. Do you just want to take the whole thing, or can I jump in at all?
Sorry,
So Judd's more active than I am in fantasy. I took a little break, like right after college. We were kind of deep into it, and then I took like a 4 or 5 year break, and then these 3 guys. One of our partners, Steven, invited me to join a league he's a commissioner in. That's a salary cap league. It's a keeper league, and it's kind of very intense, and it requires a lot of thought and a lot of time and effort. So that kind of got me back into the fantasy game maybe 5 years ago. And then Judd pulled me to this format as well. So I'm not as active as a lot of folks. Just kind of along for the ride, I would say. But Judd, I know you're more active.
Yeah, I think between the four of us, we probably do close to 20 leagues plus daily, plus now that gambling is legal in New York, New Jersey, that's increased visibility into just kind of digging into the advanced metrics and the analytics side of it too. But yeah, we're all pretty active.
Yeah, no, perfect. And how do you look at so it's obviously fantasy, but I feel like one of the last things people look at when they're building their rosters is like the actual like fantasy points, like the implications, the micro diving into like the matchups and stuff, because like that's almost like, you're doing multiple teams, right? So you're just kind of playing the game of like range of outcomes. Is this team going to win? If they do win, how are they going to win? What are the players? Rather than like breaking down each position, like he's going to score more fantasy points than that guy. Like, is that kind of how you're looking at it, more of a macro than like a micro perspective?
That's the way I look at it. I'm big into who do we think is going to play in the Super Bowl, and go and work our way backwards. There. And the reason that happened is because the first year we played, the first year we were in this contest was the year the Bucs won the Super Bowl, and on that Zoom, Judd, to his credit, was like, "Bucs are winning the Super Bowl. Bucs winning the Super Bowl. We need a Tom Brady team. And we all were just like, nah, like the Bucs aren't going to win. Sure enough, they won. So that moment made me realize, like, hey, like we got to figure out who's going to be playing at the end when those points are double. Who's going to be playing the most? Like, it's funny, we have kind of a running joke with the other guys in the fantasy league that we play with, and they're just like, oh, they looked at our roster and they're like, oh, you just picked the best teams, or I'm sorry, you just picked the best players, right? So like, and it's like, yeah, we picked the best players, and then we're talking about it a few weeks later, and he's like, well, actually, we got to figure out like how long this guy's playing and how long. And I'm like, yeah, man, like that's the complicated thing. So I'm big into working backwards. So who do I think? How many options do we have for a Super Bowl matchup? Like, is it going to be Ravens Niners? Like, then that seems pretty simple who your quarterback is going to be. But let's say like we look at another situation, and I think maybe the Browns can beat the Ravens, right? And now all of a sudden you're losing your quarterback after one game. So it's just, there are all these kind of outcomes, and that's why we have multiple teams.
Of course. Judd, thoughts? Are you under the same thing?
Yeah, completely aligned there. And the challenging piece with putting all these different players together on a fantasy performance is there's some teams where it's like, I'm going to say obvious. It's the words are never obvious, right? That's an overstatement. But in the past, right, Kelsey's been an obvious play. Tight end premium type of league, you have to play Kelsey, right? Like I think we had one Mahomes team last year, but everything else was Kelsey. And then even looking at the same thing with McCaffrey, right? Like he is so dominant and so, and just he's the man there, right? Like, and we even had a conversation today, like, is Purdy worth having as the guy? Lower point totals for scoring in this league, for throwing touchdowns, but without a doubt, like you have to have the quarterback in the Super Bowl. If you don't, you're in trouble.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Now, do you guys use so you guys do 5 $200 teams? You were saying, I think that's probably a pretty common number. You want to give yourself an opportunity to kind of build unique and different rosters. Do you guys do any of the $35 price points to get kind of crazy? Yeah. Okay. No problem. I do, because I'm a psychopath. I want to put Isaiah Likely in a couple of lineups. So because I'm crazy like that. But
I don't hate that.
Sorry, go ahead. You were going to say something, Phil?
I don't hate that Isaiah Likely play, because again, like in that situation where, if something wacky happens, because last year Josh Allen was the chalk, right? So if Josh Allen's going to play in the Super Bowl, he's going to get the wild card game plus the Super Bowl, right? And he's the guy you're going to ride. And I'm sure we're going to talk about kind of favorites and chalk and all that sort of stuff, but like, you have to think of another situation besides the Ravens just steamrolling to the Super Bowl, right? And if they lose to the Browns and Isaiah Likely has 45 receiving yards, has 6 catches for 45 yards and a touchdown, like he may very well outscore Lamar if he has a bad game. So in that situation, you are immediately going to leapfrog all those guys that plugged in Lamar Jackson. Now, are we going to have multiple Lamar Jackson teams? Yeah, of course, but there are other situations that you have to account for, and that's part of that. Like, hey, is this matchup a bad matchup for this guy?
Yeah, no, yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Judd.
No, I agree.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll get into a little bit towards the end of the show here. We'll probably go about a half hour tonight, guys. I know you got a show coming up after this, and people are building rosters, and this is good stuff. We'll get into maybe some more micro takes at the end. But so you're talking about you get unique and what players to fade and all this type of stuff. How unique do you need to be? So last year you did 5 teams. I don't know, if how unique you guys got on those teams. Now your championship team here, I'll read it off. It was Jalen Hurts, Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, Justin Jefferson, Christian Kirk. I heard you guys talk about that before. Travis Kelce, Stephon Diggs, Saquon Barkley, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, Miami D, which you said was crucial before, and Justin Tucker. Judd, talk to me about the Miami defense. We're talking off stream about how that made a big factor in you guys winning last year. Miami defense against Josh Allen round one.
Yeah, I mean, even hearing you say the team, right? It sounds chalk of chalk, right? It's like very simple. Pick the best player on every team, but it's there's a couple pieces there that allow you to differentiate. And the reality is too, with a tournament of this size, and I'm not downplaying the size of it, but there's 7,500 entries. It's not like a DraftKings or FanDuel Millie Maker where there's 500,000 people. You could have the best team without having the nuts. And I think that's something that's really important to recognize in this. And I remember even saying last year, when we were watching the games and Hawkinson was going off and we had Jefferson, I'm like, well, we just lost because we didn't have Hawkinson. But the reality is it's only 7,500 people, which sounds like a lot, but it's not. So the small differentiators, right? So we took the Miami Dolphins defense because one at the time they had no Tua. So no Tua, it was very easy to fade the skill position players there. And at the same time, going against Josh Allen, who was the chalk, who was one of the hottest quarterbacks in the league, prone to turnovers, prone to sacks. And the other piece too is FFPC does not go negative points. So no matter what, you're going to have a floor on what you can accomplish, and you can build up from there. So for us, we got them at 3% ownership, which them, Kirk, and Hurts were really our true differentiators.
Go ahead, Phil.
And yeah, I mean, to be perfectly honest, like Hurts was our guy. If you look at the finishing standings, the top whatever teams had Jalen Hurts for good reason. But when we're building these teams, don't if you have 5 teams, don't be like, all right, I'm going to have Purdy on one team, McCaffrey on another team, Debo on another team, Kittle on another team, Tyreek on one team, 2 on one team. You know what I mean? Because all those different combinations, you have to be incredibly lucky to have that hit. Have some conviction, right? Have some conviction in guys. So we were Jamar Chase across the board for the Bengals. We were Justin Jefferson across the board for the Bengals. We were Miami defense across the board. We were Justin Tucker across the board. We were, I think maybe we had 4 CeeDee Lamb teams and 1 Tony Pollard team. So maybe if Tony Pollard goes off, we were covered in that regard. And then the places where we did differentiate, we just got lucky, right? The Dolphins were a very low ownership team, like Judd said, and they scored a touchdown. And as soon as they scored a touchdown, I was like, that's really good for us. Because again,
that's great. That's right.
If you look at the final standings, because trust me, we looked at these standings all from championship weekend on. We were following closely, and there would be a 6-point differential, and there would be 500 places in between that. Yep. And it's insane the amount of the just a point here, a point there, and what that can do for it. But there's a reason why these guys are chalk. There's a reason why everybody has Jamar Chase, because he's the best player on the Bengals, right? And yeah, Justin Jefferson is going to outscore TJ Hawkinson, but Judd and I had that exchange after that game, and I said, I'll bet you anything. It was funny. I saved the text message and everything. I texted him and I said, I can guarantee you that the winner of this contest is going to have Justin Jefferson. And, we did. So it's don't feel like, that's my biggest piece of advice. Don't feel like you have to go crazy with all these different combinations of all these different guys to strike gold. You need your players. and then you can try to build and kind of make little tweaks from there.
And I think also too with like building off the chalk, and I'm going to revert back to daily here, right? So like when you look at daily, the chalk doesn't win. And the reason the chalk doesn't win is because one, high ownership, and two, if the chalk fails, you only get one shot at it. Whereas this, you're looking at the chalk, take Jamar Chase, right? He played 3 games. So you get the aggregate of 3 games. It's not just a 1 week piece, right? That's why we had so much confidence in McCaffrey, because we get 3 games of McCaffrey. He's going to outscore any other player over a 3-week run on the Niners as a skill position player. So it's not just one guy. Like that's the chalk wins. And I would argue, I don't know what the team before us won with, but I would imagine there was a lot of chalk.
Yeah. So the team before, so I've had the winner on this. You had a 3rd year in a row that I've had the winner on, that we've had the winner on the show. I love talking to you guys about this. I mean, I could talk all night. So many questions coming off of these, and so many comments.
Too.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a fun way to do this. I absolutely love it. 2 years ago, if I'm thinking of the right year correctly, think that was that Bills Chiefs 2 years ago. The winner actually had Gabe Davis is the guy who got him.
Oh yeah, he went off.
Went nuts. Only played 2 games. Remember, went bananas, and that was the guy. He was sub. I think it was like 3% owned. And I don't know, you guys do the follow for Fantasy Mojo, or you subscribers to that? I mean, I would recommend that highly to anyone. You know, I do this, you know, for fun and all that. Like if it was up to me, I wouldn't tell anybody about Fantasy Mojo, but I'm behooved to tell people. It's such good information. He says you have to have, like, just from historical data, you have to have a player that's less than 10% owned on your roster to get through. But you also need chalk to keep up. Like you were saying, Judd, like if CMC goes to the Super Bowl, like you better have CMC type of thing, because he's going to blow you away. Or, you know, maybe like to me, we might be getting ahead of ourselves here in the show, but you know, to me, if you get a Bills Niners Super Bowl, it's going to be the Allen CMC team is going to be the nuts, because he's got the extra game. He's got to go crazy to get him there and that whole thing. So like you said, you need that chalk, Judd, to get you there. And then the 5, 6, 4, 5 matchups kind of in the middle there, the Lions, the Rams, you got to get lucky with picking the right guy in there. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, you do it right. Like our guy last year, our other guy was Christian Kirk, right? I think there was really 2 skill position players that were identified on the Jags. It was ETN and it was Kirk. We had Kirk. We got him at low ownership also, and he was a huge difference maker for us.
But here's the other thing.
Power's out. Power's gone. Kirk was that the miracle Jaguars? The Jaguars had a miracle win against the Chargers last year, right? Down by like 20 or something. And sorry, he's back. Sorry, Phil.
My bad.
What were you saying?
You don't have to be perfect. Like, we were despondent because we faded the Seahawks on all 5 of our teams.
DK
and DK went crazy. And so we're looking at that like there's no way we can catch anybody with a DK team. And I mean, you know, obviously a lot of people faded the Seahawks as well, and a lot of people missed on that. But like with 7,500 people, there are going to be a bunch of DK teams, and we were just like, dang man, like how are we going to keep up? So like the other thing that I would stress is like, you do not have to be perfect. You got to get a little lucky, and you got to be consistent, and you have to have some good picks, and that'll kind of carry you.
Yeah, no, I love that. So someone mentioned in the chat here, like if you were doing 5 teams, would you do like 3 like very similar type of builds, 3 similar, maybe 2 with like a little bit of difference? Like how do you guys, or does that factor in at all? Like, hey, we're gonna do 4 with the same theme kind of deal where we're fading the same teams and all that, maybe 1 kind of off the radar there. So go ahead.
I wish we talk about this all the time. I wish we had recorded the Zoom that we used when we built the teams, because like I looking back, I don't know what I remember the very specific arguments we had about like, do we want a Jalen Hurts team or not? I would say largely, at least, and I'm speaking just for myself, I work quarterback down. So like we're gonna have some Lamar teams, but not all the teams are going to be Lamar teams. So if we don't have a Lamar team, what Raven do we have? And kind of work backwards from there. And then we'll say, we're going to go, let's say hypothetically, I don't know what we're going to do, but let's say we're going to go Christian McCaffrey across the board. Let's say we're going to go, we have our consistent, Tyreek Hill across the board, stuff like that. So I think you lock in guys that you don't want to mess with, CeeDee Lamb across the board, whatever it is, you find your quarterback, and then you work in the pieces. So it's like, I need a Raven here. Okay, well here's my Raven. All right, well, let's say I've got Purdy up here. Well, now I need to find a running back to replace McCaffrey. It's just kind of stuff like that.
For sure. How about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, once we didn't get too carried away with having too many duplicates outside of like a few key pieces, right? Phil said, I mean, the Dolphins we had across the board, Tucker we had across the board, Justin Jefferson we had across the board. I think McCaffrey we had across the board. We had Kittle on one of them, but
we got crazy with the Mahomes team. That was dumb.
Yeah, but also
I want to hear about that team. Let's hear about that one.
Yeah, I mean that team was not very good. But like last year, and I said it before, right? Like if you didn't have Kelsey, you couldn't win, right? There was not a single Mahomes team that I don't even know made it in the top 500 because Kelsey's run was so historic. With 1.5 premium on there. So like Phil said, like you have to find those guys, swap some out here and there, and then fill in the holes.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's super important too. Like I think structure, talking through like we're talking about here, like how to build. So I had the winner on 3 years ago. I forget the gentleman's name. He, how he would do it is I think maybe he had like 8 teams or something. It was multiple teams, and how he would do it. And this is how I started kind of building my rosters from that point on, was on the multiple teams. How he did it was he would hard fade. So when I say hard fade, I mean, you guys understand, but when I say hard fade, it's no teams at all. And soft fade is kicker defense. So he would hard fade. He'd research NFL and the betting lines and who was going to go to, he would just do a bracket and figure out who the 2 teams he thought were not going to advance and not do well in the first round. And he would hard fade them on every single team. And what that allowed, it's a little bit crazy if you think about it, because if one of those teams wins, you're kind of screwed. But it helps in a sense where now it allows you to eliminate 2 teams and then use those flex positions because you don't know, is it going to be Gibbs? Is it going to be Montgomery? Is it going to be Amon-Ra? You want shots at all of them. And when you take 2 teams out of the mix, it gives you those open flex spots now to have Kupp or Kyron or Puka, because there's teams, like you said, like you got teams like Baltimore where there's Lamar and maybe like one other piece, but then you've got these teams at the 4 or 5 seed in there. Who the heck are you? Nobody knows. 2 games from now, there's injuries, so it allows you like that extra position, that extra team spot where you can really not have to worry about the micro and the get. Just pick a ram and pick another ram and then pick another ram. You do have to have, like you said, Judd, flag plant players that you kind of have to your shell of making all your teams. But like you said, is it going to be Christian Kirk? Is it going to be, last season, all the Zay Jones came off of a massive playoff run. Is it going to be ETN? What's it going to be? Well, when you eliminate 2 teams to even worry about, so let's say, I don't know, I'm making up teams, Pittsburgh and Green Bay. Let's just take them off the list. Now I'm going to have no Steelers, no Packers. It allows me more flexibility in those flex spots.
Yeah, and to your point too, right? There's several teams where several pieces on each team are in play, right? Like you said, the Lions, I saw a stat today. The Lions are the 2nd team in NFL era to have 4 skilled positions score 10 touchdowns each, right? How do you identify who that's going to be, right? And if you start to draw out the bracket, it's all right, they're going to go against the Rams. And then if they win, they're going to go against, I'm a Cowboys fan, hopefully they're going to go against the Cowboys. But you start to draw that out, and there's some teams that have so many skill position players that it's a bit of a crapshoot, and you got to get a little bit deeper into what the coverage looks like in against those types of positions. Yeah,
for sure. All right, so kind of getting into that a little bit, talking about construction and all that type of stuff. As far as matchups, teams, do you have? We'll start with you, Phil. Do you have any teams or games, or maybe you can even do players if you want, that you're kind of targeting as part of your shell or part of your what you're going to use for the base of? I know you guys said you're doing five teams. kind of an idea of like of matchups you're trying to target and how deep are you getting into like each game specifically to kind of calculate fantasy points or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, again, like so my process, I think, is and the nice thing about having 4 guys is as hectic as it gets trying to figure out what we're going to do and come to a consensus. One, we get along well, which is great, and two, we come at it from different ways. So like, I work my way backwards, like I said, right? So like, if I think it's going to be Ravens Niners, right? We start with Lamar and Christian McCaffrey, and then I'm like, okay, how possible is it that the 49ers get upset? How possible is it that the Ravens get upset, right? And I'm looking really hard, and this is going to be a hard sell for me to the other 3 guys at what if Cleveland comes in and beats the Ravens? Like, I do not think that is impossible. Like, the Browns have a great defense. Defense travels. Defense is so important in the playoffs. The run game becomes more important. Like, maybe Gus Edwards is getting more carries. Like, and then like you overthink it, right? So like Lamar Jackson, I own Lamar Jackson in the league that we had, so I've been watching him very carefully all year, and you'll see him take off for runs and just slide really early. Right now, it's the playoffs. Maybe he's gonna make an extra move and try to take it the rest of the way. So there are all these things that are going on in your mind. But for me, I work my way backwards, and I say, all right, what's the most likely thing that everybody thinks is going to happen, right? Because like, when you're betting on games, you're not betting against Vegas. You're betting against everybody else. What's the public consensus? They think the Ravens are going to go to the Super Bowl. Well, all the casinos are really nice in Las Vegas because everybody loses. So how do the Ravens not get to the Super Bowl, right? How do they not get to the Super Bowl? Maybe they lose to the Browns, or how do the Niners, who everybody is crowning, how do they get upset? So I'll work my way back and I'll try to find those things. But like, on the same hand, the Browns still have to beat the Texans, and I know they have before, but that wasn't with CJ Stroud. And I don't know. I get excited talking about it because there are all these things kind of knocking around my head trying to figure out what to do.
Judd, go ahead.
Yeah. So, part of Phil's commentary on like working back from the quarterback is this is a league that rewards rushing touchdowns. And especially when every single point matters, right? We said it before, the difference between 1st and 10th was just a handful of points. And those handful of points are rushing touchdowns versus throwing touchdowns. And even though Lamar Jackson uses his legs over and over and over, what do you have, 2 rushing touchdowns on the season, something like that? So when you look at the true rushing quarterbacks, you can really identify as Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, who knows what's going to happen with that team right now and the injuries in his finger, and they look terrible. But you have to have a rushing quarterback, I think is part of our strategy. And then the other piece too is like, I know you said you get crazy out of with the other, with the $35 leagues. We don't get crazy like that. We might have like a player here. That's not a knock on strategy, because at some point, right, like you have to go against the grain. And I'm constantly saying go against the grain until last year I got outvoted across the board on every single thing I said. And recognize that, what Phil said, like the chalk is going to carry you. The chalk is going to be your flags. And the reality is, if CMC goes down with a calf injury, so is everyone else. So you have to plant the flags. You have to find a rushing quarterback. And then you also have to be able to do, to some level, like predict who's going to make it to the next rounds. I agree with Phil, right? Like, the Browns scare me. I don't know what happened to Flacco and this rejuvenation of youth and fantasy or fountain of youth. He looks awesome. I mean, he looks awesome. And would it shock anybody to see the Browns beat the Ravens? Defense travels, like Phil said, and it's even hard to say, like, I think the other piece of it too is identifying the right tight end this year is more important than last year, because there was only one tight end last year.
Yeah, there's so many this year. Yeah.
I would actually say there's not so many. There's so few, right? Like, there's so few studs.
Right.
Because Kelsey is obviously Kelsey, but he's been terrible the last 6 weeks. Njoku's awesome, obviously, but Amari Cooper just put up 275 yards against the same defense 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So, like, do you fade him? Kincaid's been great, but if you have Kincaid, then you don't get Allen, you don't get Cooks. So tight end premium league is really important here.
Yeah, no, that is a good. Sorry, go ahead, Phil.
No. Yeah, one of the things that I think is super interesting about this year is 3 of the guys that we had across the board, minus one guy. We had Kelsey, Justin Jefferson, and Jamar Chase. All 3 of those, not 2 obviously aren't in the playoffs, and 1 is a question mark. So like, it eliminates some of the easy decisions that we made. It eliminates, and that I think is going to be tough trying to figure out like. So you have to hard fade 2 teams, and you have to pick the other 2 teams that you think are going to lose and have them be the kicker and the defense, right? So there are a lot of games where the spread is 4 points or less. Like there's a lot of stuff that can happen. Like Dolphins Chiefs, like that could determine what happens the rest of the way in this competition, because if you pick the wrong Chief and they beat the Dolphins, or if you pick Tyreek Hill and somebody, there are a lot of there. I feel like there are a lot more question marks than there were last year. Rams Lions, that's another one. Like I have no idea what's going to happen in that game. So I'm excited, man.
Yeah, it's exciting. And you talk about the Chiefs Dolphins. It's just like, and is the win. You look forward to a game like this. The weather is going to be awful. Who's even going to? You're saying which guy do you pick? Do you want to pick any of them? Mahomes and the Chiefs offense has been struggling. The Dolphins offense is banged up. These teams have already seen each other. Those are all like really good points. And Phil, you even say you start from the top down. I'm the same way. Put that quarterback up top. I got to tell you, one of my first teams I did today, I started with the Josh Allen team, and I worked my way down through my process. And I get to the end, and I'm like, I'm kind of embarrassed. I get to the end, I'm like, wait, what team am I missing here to fade? I'm like, the Ravens? I don't have a Raven. So it goes to show the Ravens. Like, yeah, the Ravens they're going to go to the Super Bowl. Who do you freaking pick from the Ravens if it's not Lamar? Like, they just signed Cook. They're talking about Andrews might come back in the playoffs. Do you want Likely? Like, there's I think the weather and the matchups, and like you've been saying, Phil, I see where you're at already. You keep talking Cleveland, Baltimore. We haven't even talked about Houston, who's the team that's the home team, the favorite that they got to go to. That's a young offense. They got nothing to lose in a dome, high fly. Like, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying, like, it's why it's fun. It's exciting to think about for sure. In that thing. We can dig into this all night, but I think the 2 games I want to talk about, and then I'll let you guys get out of here because I know you got to move on to another show tonight. Tune into. Was it the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour with Balkman? Is that where you guys are on? Oh yeah, tune into that show. Love Balky, love the guys at the FFPC. I do want to talk. I wanted to talk about 2 games. I think 2 pivotal games as far as picking players. See if you guys had any takes on it. We'll start with the Lions and Rams. The 3 versus 6. Lions are at home, And Judd, you had mentioned earlier there was like 4 players on the team that had 10, double-digit touchdowns. So you get into this matchup, and it's almost like. It's kind of the opposite to me of the Chiefs Dolphins in a sense where like you feel like as long as you have a player from both teams in this, most of those players are going to go off. And if they go off, you don't really care who wins. Right. Whereas like the Chiefs Dolphins, like you were saying, like you might pick the wrong guy. Is Waddle playing? And even if your team wins, you might not get any points out of that player, which would suck. So what's your guys' vibe? We'll start with you, Phil. What is your vibe on this Lions game?
So here's my thing with the Lions. One of the guys that we're in this with, who won our fantasy, like our home fantasy league, he started both Lions running backs all season. Like Montgomery and Gibbs, like once they started going off, he was just like, I'm just going to roll with both of them, and he won the entire league. So that tells you how diverse that Lions offense is and how explosive it is, that you can have two running backs carry your guy. And of course, what would happen is one would go off, the other wouldn't necessarily. The other would go off, Gibbs would go off, Montgomery struggles, or vice versa. But he was covered both ways. Well, we can't be covered both ways. So like we got to pick the right one. And then Amon-Ra is a stud. Like you can't.
Tell me more about Amon-Ra. Amon-Ra is a stud.
Yeah, I think he had most 100-yard games.
Go ahead, Judd. Talk to me about the game away for Phil.
Yeah, I mean, I think
sorry.
All right, finish your thought. Finish your thought.
No, and then I'm a big believer in coaching in the NFL and how important that is. And I think what Sean McVay's done with the LA Rams this season to get them to where they are is not something that we should overlook. I think the Rams are a very good team. Obviously, we know the offense is great. We know the pieces they have on defense. So this is a really tough game, because if you pick the wrong Detroit Lion and the other guy goes off and the Lions lose, like, you're in a big hole. Like Judd talked about earlier. We talk about a lot about like kind of spreading out that risk. And if you have the 49ers and they're going to play 4 games, it's fine to have Christian McCaffrey struggle in a game. But if Amon-Ra St. Brown struggles and they lose that game and Jahmyr Gibbs scores 2 touchdowns, like, you're in a deep hole that you got to dig yourself out of. So that game is one that we're going to talk about, I'm sure, well into the night tomorrow night.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, to tomorrow night's the night. Listen, you guys got
Thursday.
Thursday. You guys got to record it for the fans. Come on, we've been hearing about this meeting all year, the meeting of the minds. But listen, I want to take a little offshoot here to talk about that real quick. It is so much fun, and I listened to your show with Balky that you guys had after you guys won. I recommend to everybody, like, if you've got a bunch of close buddies, to do stuff like this, because let me tell you, I play a ton of high stakes fantasy football, like probably way too much for way too much money. And this last weekend, or two weekends ago, I coined some teams with some close friends, and I had all, we're all busy with our lives, wives, kids, work, but we got together. We were in the FFWC Fantasy Football World Championships. We were in the top 5 going into the week.
Wow.
And we were in first place halfway through Sunday for 150K. But that Saturday night game, we had Gibbs, we had CeeDee Lamb, we had one other player, I forget who it was. But let me tell you, when CeeDee Lamb scores that 90-yard touchdown, it was a top 3 like sports moment in my life. You'd have thought the roof collapsed on my house. It was the most incredible. Like, I'm getting chills thinking about it. Like, we didn't end up winning the whole thing, but that moment is just like, and I've come in top 5 of the FFPC main event where we had some fun moments, but that moment, and I'm sure you guys shared, I wish you guys were together for that. You guys were scattered. One guy's at a ski trip, another guy's over here, but it's just such a fun experience.
So that moment for us, I think I can speak for the whole group, was the first drive of the game. We called Gainwell down on the half-yard line.
Yep.
And then you knew it was coming. And I remember when Gainwell scored, we're like, all right, that's okay. Like, no one had Gainwell. It wasn't AJ Brown, it wasn't Devonta Smith, it wasn't Goddard, it wasn't Sanders, and they didn't kick a field goal. And then they called him down with that elbow right on the one, and we knew it was coming, and it was literally off to the races from there.
Yeah,
it was. There's so many like, to your point, there's so many moments from that Super Bowl that are crystal clear. Like, the game itself, I couldn't tell you how the game went, but there's so many just very specific moments, like the Gainwell play where he was down at the half-yard line, and then after the fumble return for a touchdown, you knew Jalen was going to go off. Like, you just knew, like, you saw it, and he ended up rushing for like 35 yards on that drive, and they finished it off. It was like 3rd and goal. It was like third and 3 from the 8 or something, right? And then I say it like it's hypothetical. I know exactly what it was. Third and
That's right.
So I was like, all right, well, like, in this down and distance, you're gonna have to throw it. So, like, I hope it's not to AJ Brown. I hope it's not to Devonta Smith. And then the Chiefs jump off sides. Well, now it's 1st and goal from the 4, and you knew what was coming, and he ran that in. And I think that was the moment we took the lead for the first time. And like, from that moment on, it was just like all these, just like a coronation, just like all these different moments. Devonta Smith catches like a 35-yard pass and steps out of bounds at the 1. Like, what is he doing?
Right.
And Jalen's able to punch it in, and it just like, and we were constantly FaceTiming, like, we were constantly just like texting. It was incredible. It was so good. Incredible.
It's so good. And I'm glad you guys do that together. You get together the 4 hours to do that, because, again, like, a lot of fun experiences. Now, when you do season long, it's a little bit different, because now you've got the draft, which can be tense because you got a minute to pick, whatever. Like, a lot of times it can be a tense moments. And then throughout the year, waivers and lineup setting. I mean, I'll be honest. I've said this in the show multiple times, and he's one of my best friends, so I don't care. But we were there were moments where during the year where we came in the top 5 in the FFPC main event where I was going to buy him out of the team. Like midway through the year, I'm like, I can't take this anymore. Like we're fighting over every single thing all year. But at the end of the year, like I wish we could go back and write a book with all of our text messages because the way like the ebbs and flows, and it's so good, so much fun. But circling back real quick to that game, to that Lions-Rams game. The one thing I would recommend for that game, if you want to look at it from a micro, I think the defenses are a little bit worse in the passing game, or sorry, the receiving game, so to speak. So I might lean receivers in that matchup, which is, hurts me to say because I had Gibbs everywhere this year. I think I'm the only one in Rochester, New York with a Jahmyr Gibbs jersey. So I'm a big Jahmyr Gibbs guy. But moving on to the other game that I think is very pivotal, Tampa Philly. That's a game, again, very high, probably a very high scoring game. So even if you as long as you got a guy from each team, if the players are going to go off. But like you said, Judd, this Eagles team is looking terrible. I mean, you're loving it. You're a Cowboys fan. Their secondary, their defense is broken, which is great for Tampa. In Tampa, what are your vibes on that game?
I think the Bucs are going to win personally. I just think the Eagles look so bad. I mean, were they 1-5 in their last 6, and most of those losses are against teams that are not good. Lost to the Cardinals, lost to the Giants.
The Cardinals,
they're looking really, really bad right now, and their offense doesn't look good either. It's. I think the struggle is you want to have Jalen Hurts because you know what you're getting, right? Like you're going to get at least you're going to get a rushing touchdown a game, which we already talked about how important that is in this league. But I don't think anyone has any confidence that he's going to win more than one game, because if they win this, they're going out to San Francisco, and San Francisco put the beats on them last time. So it's tough. And the other challenge is it's a Monday night game. Swift missed last game, illness. He'll probably be back. Devonta Smith's hurt. AJ Brown's hurt. Jalen's finger was bending the other direction the other day, so it's really tough. And then when you look on the other side of the ball, right, Rachaad White has been as consistent to be, sort of a revelation this year in terms of fantasy. But you also have Mike Evans, he's boom or bust. But if there's one time to predict a boom, why not identify against arguably the worst secondary in the league right now?
Right. That's right.
So I think those are the conversations that have to happen. And on the other hand, like you could just soft fade both. I mean, I wouldn't imagine soft fading those teams, but I think hard fade could be a reality with that game. And then they're going to be one of those teams going to be on short rest coming into the next week. So
yeah. And that's an interesting point too. There's so many ways to look at this. You can hard fade, like let's just say the Eagles, you think the Eagles are going to stink, they're going to lose, they're not going to do well. You could hard fade the Eagles and then play, play pretty chalk with the rest of your players and the rest of your teams, because your uniqueness is the fact that you don't have the Eagles in there. And then you can play all your common chalk plays. There's different kind of ways to look at that. Phil, what are your thoughts on that game?
Yeah, I don't know. And this is going to be one of the things that we argue about, just because like when you look at consistency, like, first of all, two things. One, there aren't a ton of running backs, right? And you need a couple, right? So Christian McCaffrey's probably going to be one. And there aren't a ton out there that are reliable. Rachaad White is one, right? So like that would be my immediate lean, right? Like putting him on the roster, just because, it would be tough to. It would be because like one of those teams has to win. So like it's tough to like hard fade or soft fade this game because it could
be so high scoring. That's right.
Yeah. And I like, which Eagles team are we going to get? Right. Like, because it wasn't too long and I know they finished poorly. I get it. And I appreciate that. But like, what if they are the team that was 10-1 and like, maybe they were just banged up and maybe they were just like, all right, we're in the playoffs. Let's dial things back a little bit. Like, let's not get too crazy. I think the Eagles are closer to the team that we saw in the first half of the season than the second half of the season. And this is the argument that I know we're going to have in a couple nights, just because like, again, like I like last year, we were in the same situation where Jalen Hurts was banged up and a lot of people faded Jalen Hurts, and he was the number one player in, he was the number one quarterback in fantasy football. And he was, I want to say he was under 30% ownership in FFPC.
15.
And
15 last year. 15.
Oh, was it? It was that low. So like, what if we're kind of in the same situation now where maybe they put a little run together? You know what I mean? And like, yes, and they have to beat the 49ers, and I understand that. And I understand the 49ers are very good. But again, like, this is the way my mind works. Like what if is the way my mind works. And if the Eagles beat the 49ers, then our team that has Jalen Hurts, that I've talked these other guys into starting a Jalen Hurts team, suddenly is this powerhouse. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's just
it's interesting, and I think the thought of like if I personally I'm not hard fading either one of those teams, but a similar game on the other side that you could hard fade would be like Dolphins Chiefs, because in a situation like I think Eagles Bucks going to be a shootout regardless. So like I would hate to miss out on a shootout. Dolphins Chiefs with that weather and the way those offenses are playing right now. If I'm gonna hard fade a team from one of those four teams, it's going to be Dolphins or Chiefs, which is insane to even say, but the weather's a factor, injuries are a factor when you get down here, and the what if game, is a game, Phil, that you have to play. Like you got to look at the range of outcomes. You can't be completely, you have to have your flag plant players and stuff like that, but you got to play that what if game, to kind of look down the line a little bit to see like what teams are playing. But I do like this game to shoot out. And if the Eagles do win, how do they win? Like you were saying, Phil, I think it's Jalen Hurts. It's Jalen Hurts on 3 1-yard touchdown runs. You know what I mean? That's, if they do win, that's how they are going to win. So again, I don't know what it's going to take for you guys or myself or whoever to get to Jalen Hurts as your quarterback, maybe on how many rosters you guys are going to do or whatever. But that's the stuff. Maybe he's the less than 10% owned player this year that you need to have to get through.
I listen, and it's just from a standpoint of how much we owe Jalen Hurts. Like maybe we'll add a 6th team that's a Jalen Hurts team. I don't know, man. He did a lot for my family, so I would feel bad. I would feel bad fading him.
I love it. He did a lot for my family. Does he know that? I hope he knows that. Okay.
I got to get word to him somehow.
I got to get word, but it's true. It's true. And it's natural. Like we become attached to these situations. I remember 2019 was one of my greatest years ever in fantasy, and it was on the back of Lamar and CMC, and I'll never forget that year and the the MVP season Lamar had and CMC. That was the last elite year he had. He obviously have another one this year, but no, it's hard too. Like I heard you guys on another interview talking about, I forget who it was, talking about like how Zay Jones last year had come off that insane performance. I think it was week 15, and you're like, man, maybe he's a thing here. And one of you guys wanted him, and the other 3 were like, no, you're an idiot. We're not going to do that. I don't remember who it was, but it's those recency biases of how those teams are playing, who they're targeting, and it's always the teams, right, that have multiple weapons. You're trying to find that little edge, that little piece that can kind of hopefully lead you to the promised land for that specific team.
I'm just real quick. This season, I forget, it's whatever the Eagles' first primetime game was. We were all watching it in obviously different parts of the country, and like whoever was carrying the ball was down at the 1-yard line, and they lined up for the tush push from the 1, and Jalen Hurts was under center, and I just got tingles. I was like, this is like, anytime I see that from now on, it's just like, this is the guy. Like, that's my guy. Like, how do I fade him? I don't know. So we'll see.
Yeah. And I had a lot of DeAndre Swift this year. So when they got to the 1, I got whatever the opposite of the tingles are, whatever that is, ripping the rest of my hair out. You know what I mean? Like, here we go. And I have this line that I'm always screaming at my house. My kids, you guys know, wives, kids, whatever. You got like people, you're screaming at the TV things that doesn't make any sense to them. But I'm screaming like, why does Jalen Hurts play on a 97-yard football field? I just keep screaming that every drive. Every game ends up at the freaking 2-yard line or the 1-yard line. And there goes Jalen Hurts. So, yeah. But listen, guys, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. I learned a lot. I'm hoping everyone else watching learned a lot too. And I know you guys got a lot of work to do. It's a big show. big show for Thursday night. Everybody tune in to the four guys getting together to figure it out. But hopefully no friendships are ruined. Hopefully there's some money to be spent amongst you guys.
Appreciate it.
Of
yeah,
course.
Thanks so much for having us on. That was a lot of fun.
Of course. And check these guys out tonight on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour with Balky. And we will see you next week.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.